Baby, it is cold outside. Thankfully, it's nice and warm here in my kitchen, but I've brought a little bit of the outside in. And I'm going to see how I can capture the essence of this ice as best as I can on my smartphone. I've got a few little tools that are going to help me to do this. First of all, it's a clear tumbler. Pop that on there. Important thing about this tumbler is that it's got a flat bottom, and that is going to be my stage, if you like them. So I turn it on its head, and then underneath I can put a torch. This is one of my favourites, and I can just put the torch under there. If you don't have one of those, a normal torch with a slightly larger glass or a lamp or something will have pretty much the same effect. But I found this to be effective before. Now, put it on this black slate just to help the background disappear. We'll see how we can change the camera's exposure in a moment to make that happen. But let's get our Icecube. Now, the thing about ice is that there is a natural deadline here because with the heat from the lamp, it is already starting to melt. So, time is of the essence. Let's give it a go. So, crack open the camera and see what we get straight away. Now, obviously that is a terrible shot. I can see all of the distraction in the background. I'm not really focusing in on the Icecube, and I can see the torch as well. So that isn't the effect that I want. Now, what I don't have, and this camera doesn't have it, some do, this one doesn't, is one of these macro modes that lets you get really, really close up to your subject. You can see when I do that on this camera, it just refuses to focus because of this minimum focusing distance that all cameras kind of have, unless they've got an ultra macro mode, which this one doesn't have. But not to worry, because I do have a variety of lenses on here, so you can kind of cheat, if you like, when it comes to getting close up to your subject. So if I just push in a little bit, that's my 2x lens. Now this all of a sudden starts to look a lot more interesting. If I just tap and hold my auto exposure, auto focus, and then just drag that down, you see how the background that was there, or the table and everything else, just starts to disappear, and this starts to look like a much more interesting shot. Of particular interest is now how I can start to see the detail in the Icecube. I'm just going to just take a couple of shots like that. I'm not sure this is the finished product, but I still find it quite interesting. What's happening is that the light from the torch is kind of shining up and creating this backlight effect. So let's just tap and focus in on a new point. And because I've got my zoom lens, I'm able to fill my frame, but I'm not super close. So I can still get kind of the effect that I'm looking for. Now, if you've got more than a 2x zoom, then it's worth experimenting there as well. Let's push right in, and wow, okay. Just need to re-establish my focus there. And now you can start to see all of these bits of detail in the Icecube. Now, again, you just want to ride the exposure a little bit because there's a lot of light, a lot of dark happening here. It helps that my phone's automatically switched into HDR mode. But this starts to look otherworldly, which, well, as you know, I do love something that looks like something else, and that's exactly the effect I'm getting here. I mean, feel free to move around your subject as well. It is starting to melt now, so time is running out. But just start to look at where the transparent bits are. You can just see the bubbles that are forming. Oh yeah, that's really interesting. So just pull down on the exposure again. Think of composition, of course. Look for your lines. You see what happens when I don't look exposure? The table, you can just start to see the browns of this table in the background. I mean, I could come up a little bit and make sure that I've got this slate in the background, but that's not quite the composition I want. So again, just experiment with locking your exposure. Now you can see the table disappears in the background. So let's have a look at what happens if I get that diagonal line like that. Oh, this phone doesn't seem to lock focus and exposure for very long. So just look for those bits where it is a bit more transparent. There's so much variety. I mean, even in the box of ice cubes that I froze, some were a bit mistier, some were a bit cloudier, some were lovely and clear. But really try and, if I get a bit closer in there, oh yeah, look at that. Really getting the detail. And because of how the torch is shining, it's kind of creating this kind of backlight halo effect. So not forgetting my rules of composition. So if I just make the horizon there on that top third, it almost looks like it's some kind of icy landscape, meteorite zooming through space. That looks particularly interesting. Right, lots there that's interesting. I'm just going to move this ice cube around a few more times and then we'll see which shots catch my eye. Looking at this image, I am astonished at just how much detail we're able to capture without even using a macro lens. We've got the air bubbles, we've got various kind of like journey lines and cracks and fractures in the ice. We even got down here what I presume are some scratches on the base of the drinking glass I was using as my light box. Despite all of that detail, however, there's too much going on. That's why compositionally this doesn't quite work for me. I marvel at the detail, but I'm kind of let down by how it all hangs together as a piece of photography. My abstract tendencies are very excited when I look at this image. It's another one of those where unless you were told it was an ice cube, you'd be kind of scratching your head and wondering. We've got this horizon here, and I've used that compositional rule of thirds again to create this sense that it's a landscape rather than a semi-macro shot of an ice cube. And we've got these bits of detail in the ice. I didn't even know what they are. They look kind of organic in a way, as though they're swimming to or from something. The lighting just works beautifully. One thing that I find interesting, and certainly wasn't my intention, are if you look very closely, there are some very fine vertical lines in there, and the only thing I can think of is that there's some kind of artifact from the LED torch I was using. Wasn't my intention to have them there, but that they are in there actually I think only augments the interest in this shot for me. However, my favourite of the images has to be this one for a number of reasons. The use of negative space, this big dark triangle on the top corner, creates as much interest as the ice itself. We've got all different types of hard lines from the ice, but we've also got this little droplet of melting ice, water just kind of running down the outside here that creates this sense of movement. We've got the detail, we've got the composition, we've got lots of interest in there. That is why this is my favourite ice cube shot so far.